Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I decided to start with a little bit of positivity on this Monday morning and talk about one positive thing for the future of every single NBA team. And in a video a little bit later today, I may or may not be being brutally honest about the future of every single NBA team. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day, right up until the start of the NBA season on December 22nd. So if you're looking for a place for consistent NBA offseason content, then this is a great place to be. I'm also on the push towards 100,000 subscribers, which as of this morning, we're less than 7,000 subscribers away from that 100,000 mark. You can also leave a like rating on the video as well. It helps me out a ton. It lets me know that you're enjoying the content, and it helps get the video out to more people on YouTube as well. You can also hang out with me outside of these videos on the various socials at the bottom of the screen, whether that be Twitter, Discord, or Twitch, where I stream a guaranteed 5 times per week. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to start in the Eastern Conference, beginning with the top team in the conference and then going on down. So, of course, we're going to begin with the Milwaukee Bucks. And it's pretty simple here. As long as he re-signs, they have the league MVP. They have a core of players there that have won 60 games before. They have a coach that seems well connected to the players. And again, so like they have, in the regular season at least, a core of players that they're going to be really, really good moving forward, assuming that Giannis stays, which is obviously a positive. For the Toronto Raptors, they have a ton of 2021 cap space. They are going to have a tremendous amount of flexibility next offseason, whether that be in free agency or via trades. And as an added bonus, they've got guys like Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, assuming they re-sign him this offseason, and OG Anunoby to continue to build this group and be one of the better teams in Eastern Conference over the next couple of seasons. Next up, the Boston Celtics. They have a legitimate All-NBA caliber player moving forward in Jason Tatum. Not to mention Jaylen Brown, not to mention one of the better coaches in the league in Brad Stevens, but the number one point for me would be Jason Tatum being on this roster, a guy that can be a legitimate star in this league moving forward at still such a young age. Next up now is the Indiana Pacers. This one gets a little bit tougher, but you do have to give them credit for having an all-star caliber big man on their roster in Domantas Sabonis. They still need to figure out the fit with him and the rest of the roster, whether that be the front court or otherwise. But if you're looking for one shining point for this group, either as a player or as a potential trade asset, I think Domantas Sabonis is the first place that you would look. Next up now, the Miami Heat. In a bit of a similar situation there, I would go with Bam Adebayo most notably when you're talking about kind of a bright spot for this team, similar to how I just talked about Sabonis, but there's plenty of other bright spots on this roster, whether it's Duncan Robinson, whether it's Tyler Hero, whether it's their ability to continue to grow and develop young players. Primarily, I would say Bam Adebayo, but in general, they've got that going for them and a ton of cap space coming up here in the summer of 2021 as well. So a lot of good things going there for Miami coming off of a surprising finals run this season. Next up now, the Philadelphia 76ers, and this one's a little bit tougher, right? Because the payroll stuff isn't great, but you still can't go wrong with the Ben Simmons-Joel Embiid combination from a talent standpoint. Fit, okay, if you want to call that into question, that's fine. Most notably for me, I would go with Ben Simmons just because you don't know if Embiid is going to be healthy moving forward, but there's still plenty of positive things for the future of the Sixers roster, and there's plenty of scenarios in which they figure this thing out and be a really, really good team over the next handful of years. Next up now, the Brooklyn Nets. The future is a little bit murky in terms of like way down the road, but you can still clearly see that they have a really good duo combination there in Brooklyn between Kyrie and Kevin Durant. If you want to look future, assuming he stays on the roster, I think Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, I think those guys are still really good players and should continue to be in Brooklyn or elsewhere if they do end up getting moved. So there at least are some future assets there in Brooklyn. Next up now for the Orlando Magic. This is right around the point where things start to get a little bit more difficult. You could certainly look at someone like Aaron Gordon and say, hey man, I mean, this guy could be, a pretty good player moving forward. His contract value continues to decrease over the next handful of seasons, and he is still so young. Maybe you could point to someone like Markelle Fultz. In general, though, there's not a whole lot positive to say about the future of Orlando. I would go with Jonathan Isaac, but the injury he sustained in the bubble puts that a bit in question for me. Next up now, the Washington Wizards, who obviously have the John Wall contract over their heads here, but whether it's as a player or as an asset, having Bradley Beal on the roster, one of the better offensive players in the entire league, is certainly a positive thing. Apart from that, I'm not sure there's too much to say about Washington. Next up now, the Charlotte Hornets are at least going to have a ton of flexibility moving forward in terms of their cap space once the Nicholas Batum contract comes off, and they've got a high pick in this draft as well, which makes things much better for them. They're guaranteed to get one of the three, in their opinion, best players in the draft, whether that presumably is Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, James Wiseman, or potentially Denny as well. So we'll kind of wait and see on that, but that draft pick is really the best thing they have going for them right now. Next up, the Chicago Bulls actually have a lot of things going for them. They've got a high draft pick, but they've also got high draft picks up and down this roster. And with this coaching change, maybe that's all they need to unlock the young talent of Lauri Markkanen, of Wendell Carter Jr. if he can stay healthy, of Kobe White, and then obviously Zach LaVine, who's been a really good player as well. So from an asset standpoint, that one coaching change, I think, has really changed a lot of things in a positive direction for Chicago. Next up now, the New York Knicks. And I would go with the combination of RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, and still, having cap space and being the Knicks is still going to be somewhat of an asset moving forward. But primarily, I would point to that Barrett and Robinson combination. If they can build players around that, I think that's a great place to start. Next up now, the Detroit Pistons. I don't know. There's not a lot of positivity here to bring to the Pistons unless Christian Wood actually ends up being a really good player. They retain him and he can end up, being something for them moving forward. I mean, Luke Kennard, I guess, is an asset here. So if you want to say something positive, there's a handful of young guys I guess you could get excited about. Sekou Doumbouya would be someone I would point to, but hate to kind of be the bearer of bad news, but not a whole lot positive going on there in Detroit. For the Atlanta Hawks, however, they have a really nice core of young players, assuming they develop properly, that could point them in the direction of being a really good team over the next couple of years once those guys do develop. And of course, the one shining point here over everything else is Trae Young. Last up now for the Cleveland Cavaliers, they do at least have somewhat of an asset there in Kevin Love via trade, but I would still point towards Colin Sexton, who appears to be the best young player on the roster, someone that maybe won't ever be an all-NBA caliber player, but maybe could have an all-star nomination down the road for him. Looks like someone that can score 20 points per game, albeit on a not great offensive team there in Cleveland. We'll see how he continues to grow and develop, but if you're looking for 1 point, you'd probably look towards Sexton there in Cleveland. Next up now, the LA Lakers, as we switch to the Western Conference. I mean, as long as LeBron's on the roster and at the level that he's at, they're going to be championship contenders. Now, if you're looking more towards the future, then you just look at Anthony Davis, right? I mean, that duo is pretty clearly one of the best in the league, so there's really not a whole lot to say there for the Lakers. For the Clippers, when you're talking about their future, the opportunity to re-sign Kawhi Leonard and Paul George is the best thing they have going for them. Other than that, honestly, there's not a whole lot going for them in terms of a future projection for this roster. Next up now, the Denver Nuggets. They have one of the better young cores in the league, and I think that people would be surprised to learn just how young that group actually still is, whether you're talking about Jokic, Jamal Murray, whatever Gary Harris could be. They've got Bol on the bench. They've got Michael Porter Jr. that could still be something. Lots of positive things for the future of a Denver Nuggets team that just made the Western Conference Finals. Next up now, the Houston Rockets. Again, kind of like the Clippers, it's a little bit tough to find a future fit thing. I mean, as long as James Harden is there, they're going to have a borderline MVP caliber player. That's pretty much the only positive future thing I can say about them right now, considering their limited draft pick situation moving forward. Next up now, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it's very clearly to me two things. One, the draft picks and everything, but also Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who I continue to say I think could be an all-NBA caliber player in the future moving forward for this franchise. It's a great place to be in when you consider him as well as the draft picks. Next up now, the Utah Jazz. I would still point to Donovan Mitchell, but I think that we're starting to get towards maybe a bit of a weird situation there in Utah, depending on how the roster, shakes out moving forward. But the one shining light 100% for their future is, having such a dynamic young guard in Donovan Mitchell that continues to improve year after year. Next up now, the Dallas Mavericks. It's Kristaps Porzingis and it's Luka Doncic. There really doesn't need to be anything else said here for them. It's pretty obvious what Dallas has going for them. It's those two guys. It's cap flexibility and the cap space in 2021. It's pretty clear. Next up now for Portland. This is a tough one because, they've got Dame, they've got CJ. Yusuf Nurkic is still relatively young, but in terms of future assets, they don't really have a ton, and it's basically just as long as that core is together, they're going to have a chance at a playoff trip every single year. Apart from that, though, not a whole lot going on for their future. Next up now, the Memphis Grizzlies. It's pretty clear. It's Ja Morant, right? It's Ja Morant, it's Jaren Jackson Jr., it's whatever they do in the draft moving forward. Sucks they don't have their pick this year, but they've got two really, really good players to build around there in Memphis. Next up now, the Phoenix Suns. It's Devin Booker and it's DeAndre Ayton, and it's what they built in the bubble. Clearly, there is something positive to work off of there if they make the correct moves. I wouldn't be surprised to see them win somewhere around 40 games this upcoming season, depending on what they do in their offseason based off the momentum that they built up in the bubble. 40 wins for them in a full regular season, which I guess it's only going to be 72 games, so maybe that number's a little bit high, but 40 games would be a huge number for them, considering what they've been through over the last couple of years. Next up now, the San Antonio Spurs. I would point towards still this young group of guards that they have that they're still trying to figure out, but each of them could end up being good players, whether it's White, whether it's Murray, whether it's Keldon Johnson, whether it's Lonnie Walker, whatever. They've got a core of players there at the guard position that chances are one of them is going to be really good, and that's just a nice thing to have there in San Antonio. Next up now, the Sacramento Kings. I still love De'Aaron Fox, and I also think people are really undervaluing Marvin Bagley. He might get his own video at some point here because this is a guy that is still incredibly talented. And no, he shouldn't have been picked ahead of Luka Doncic, but don't write off his career completely here. If he gets healthy, that could be a huge difference maker for Sacramento. Next up now, the New Orleans Pelicans. It's pretty simple. It's Zion. It's all the picks. It's all the young players. Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, even you could throw in there, Jackson Hayes, whoever they pick in this draft. They've got a ton of things going for them in the present as well as the future with those younger players, as well as the trade possibility of Drew Holiday, as well as future draft picks, which they could be adding to. Next up now, the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's whoever they pick number one in this draft, and then it's D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns, right? It's pretty clear that that is a future that you can build around here, and at least on the offensive end of the floor, they should be a pretty good team over the next couple of years. Defensively, I don't know. Offensively, though, they've definitely got a nice group moving forward. Last up now is the Golden State Warriors. And again, it's that high draft pick. It's their ability to add to what is already a championship-proven core there in Golden State and bridge the gap between what has been a bit of a dynasty over the last 5 to 6 years into a new era of Warriors basketball with that player that they pick here, or potentially move for a younger-ish star to, again, kind of bridge that gap moving forward. So it's pretty clear what they have going for them as well. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.